I've been thinking a lot lately about the games that I've had the privilege of covering extensively as a content creator over the years, mainly being Planetside 2 and BattleBit Remastered. Games that I've been really critical of as of late especially, but only because I care deeply about them and want to see them succeed. Both of which are arguably two very decent FPS games that hold unique spins and ideas on the, large-scale team-based FPS formula, at least when compared to the rest of the market. And it kind of got me thinking, why have both of these games found themselves at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to player counts? Was there something that saw them become dying or dead games in what should have been a very strong market position? Now, that can also be seen as a bit of a rhetorical question, given that you could easily look at both of these games and come up with a million points in their lifespan as to why they have both failed to a certain extent, depending on your stance and how cynical you want to be. It's no secret that both games have had multiple development missteps and controversies that only accelerated their fall from grace, as it were. We could easily do an hour-long video on each game, but that's neither here nor there, nor what today's video is about. No, today I actually want to use the story of BattleBit in particular, but also a little bit about Planetside 2, as a catalyst to have a discussion about just how volatile it is to enter the online first-person shooter market these days as a competitor to the big boys in town. Because whether we like it or not, guys, at a very high level, every single first-person shooter game out there in existence right now is competing with each other for your time as a player. Counter-Strike competes with Apex Legends, Battlefield competes with COD, and PUBG competes with Planetside. Sure, they are all fundamentally different games from a design perspective, but they all operate under the same overarching genre, first-person shooters. They give you a gun, they give you a bunch of other players to kill. All they are doing is creating a unique combination of mechanics and gameplay loops within that overarching theme to try and appease to a market or an audience that the developer believes is out there. Now, BattleBit in particular, at the risk of being overly simplistic, underpinned itself by leaning on the core tenets that were established from the Battlefield franchise. They then expanded on that formula by introducing some tac shooter / milsim mechanics, really focusing on polishing the game and making it more accessible by making it an easy to run game with its graphics style. It was this hybrid game that hit on the themes that Battlefield just seemed to be missing the mark on over the past couple of years, while also doing its own thing and being unique where it could be. The same could be said for Planetside 2, but in the opposite direction of trying to play into a more persistent war type direction that was, far more hardcore and required more attention and resources from its players to succeed. Now, I'm sure that people want to argue with me about the nuance of that in the comment section down below, but realistically speaking, that comparison sticks when you go toe-to-toe between the franchises and their core mechanics. The point, though, ultimately, is that all of these games in question that all operate within the first-person shooter space are all competing with each other. And they are all competing for one key resource: your time. Now, obviously they want your money as well, don't get me wrong, but I'm gonna posit that your time in these games is actually the most valuable resource to any online first-person shooter game out there for one reason and one reason alone. You and your presence in the game is actually a part of the game's content offering. The player base themselves are very much the content that makes up a multiplayer first-person shooter game. And without the player base, your multiplayer FPS game very quickly is no longer a game at all. Now, that statement can of course be applied to every PvP-driven experience out there, I admit, but for the sake of this video, I do want to focus on how this applies to the first-person shooter market because, well, that's my forte. But I do see a lot of comments on my videos when I talk about player counts in games and how that reflects on the health of a game. Things that go along the lines of player count doesn't matter as long as the game itself is good, just play the game and enjoy it forehead. And look, I would say that this is true in any single player experience or maybe even a co-op player experience, because the experience at that point is not dependent on the presence of other players there to bounce the experience off of it. I mean, yes, to a certain extent, a co-op experience is reliant on other players being there, but you can control that yourself within your friendship group a bit more directly. And in a single player experience, the core experience is available to you if you're the last standing player playing that game. Now, of course, that's not the case for a PvP-centric FPS game like, say, BattleBit Remastered. Sure, the developers can lay the groundwork and ensure that the content offering from their side is solid and plentiful, but the player base themselves and how they interact with the content the developers put forth is actually the very catalyst for the game having content to enjoy in the first place. Without a player for you to verse or shoot at, you are still very much playing a shooter game. Yes, you still have a gun in your face, you still have a map that you can traverse on foot or with vehicles, whatever, but you still have no means to engage with the core challenge that the game's content is trying to place on you, that being shooting bad guys. When BattleBit launched, it was populated by thousands of players across all regions. You had countless servers open with a variety of experience for you to jump between. The player base itself generated an endless amount of content and offering within the game by populating and supporting a variety of experiences. If you wanted to switch between playing smaller scale rush matches to large scale conquest games, you could do that with hardly any issue. But fast forward to today, the game's player base has shrunk to such an extent that you can hardly find a server with anyone on it in the first place in your region, unless you live in the EU or the States. Somewhere in the middle of those 2 points, certain game modes became harder to find in certain regions. Then certain maps became less popular in the rotation. Then the smaller pool of players meant the expansion of the skill curve to enjoy the game in the first place. The content offering, by virtue of the content the player base could support within the game, dwindled exponentially over time. Now, switching gears for a moment here, let's take a look at Planetside 2, a game whose whole shtick and whole selling point is all about simulating a war on a planetary scale between 3 factions. Nowadays, you'd be lucky to get 3 big battles on a singular continent. Not exactly reflective of the game's intentions, hey? Again, the content from a game design perspective is there, but the content that comes from the player interactions, not so much anymore. This is the volatility I speak to, folks. BattleBit and Planetside both hold the groundwork, to certain extents, to be functionally solid games. But without the player base to support that vision and to provide the quote-unquote content that makes up the core experience of that vision, then your game stays just that, a vision. The developers of both games lost the one battle they needed to win in this industry, winning the time of their players for the long run in a highly competitive market. Now, as I said before, that occurred through a ton of different factors and decisions for each game. On the development side primarily, I'm not blaming the player base for this, by the way. But once the scales start to tip and players start to stop finding the content through player interactions that they were once seeking in the game, then it's a very slippery slope that is very hard to hit the brakes on once it gets started. And once you hit rock bottom, it's even more challenging to climb up that massive hill. Having a healthy player base and community around your competitive multiplayer first-person shooter games is the cornerstone to ensuring that you actually have a means to experience the content you put forward as a developer. And with there being only so many players out there, spread across so many games in an industry that's only getting more competitive, it's no wonder why the industry is so volatile right now and why so many games seem to, start off strong and die overnight. Which also means it's also no wonder why so many will gravitate towards the Goliaths that release yearly, sometimes shoddy games, like Call of Duty. It's always the meme like, why does Call of Duty sell so many copies every year? It's just the same thing copy-pasted. You want to know why, folks? Because in the context of a multiplayer first-person shooter game, players know that there will always be a surplus of other players to bring the content of that game to life. And with that, it's why games like Call of Duty hold the dominant market position, and they kinda always will, because they win the time of their players by having a consistent ability to access and experience the content on their own time. Building a consistent experience similar to that as a new player on the market is a nigh impossible job. And that's not to say I don't want more developers coming out to attempt to take on that challenge, because I do. Competition in the industry is extremely healthy. It's why I'm so excited for Delta Force to potentially do really well when we finally get to play the game again on the 5th of December. But I really do believe that the volatility of the first-person shooter market and the lessons that we've learned over the years through the experiences of many developers that have tried and unfortunately failed is one that I do hope will inform developers as they, learn from the mistakes of others in the future. But folks, if you made it this far in the video, I thank you for joining me on this little conversation today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed today's video, a backhand of the like button would also go a long way to supporting the channel. And if you're new, consider subscribing too. too. Would be great to have you a part of the community as we continue to delve into more conversational topics about first-person shooter games more broadly, and just, the gaming industry as well. I love talking about this stuff with you guys, and it'd be great to have you a part of the community here as well. And speaking of joining the community, our Twitch and our Discord, both linked in the description down below. Come check it out, come join us. It'd be great to see you guys there too. Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.